Hello. This is a podcast called The Unhinged Binge. I'm the person talking, Lego. I rant a lot, typically about horror films, but today I'm here to talk about heated rivalry and a different subjects that pertain to the narrative around heated rivalry and some recent queer content. Normally I do like research heavy video essays, but today I'm just going for vibes. I just really wanted to talk about this to info dump and for the catharsis. Um, I will be talking again a lot about the narrative around the show. So if that's not something you're as interested in, there are so many really great reviews and analyses of this show out there. Um, there's so many, so many you can find on various platforms. Please go watch those and just go watch them regardless if you like the show. Um, okay, I'm gonna give you a quick recap of the show. You probably don't need it, and I apologize in advance. As I was writing it, I realized I didn't look up as many people's names as I should have, but it's too late now. We're going in. Okay, so Heated Rivalry is a 2025 6-episode Canadian series based on a novel series entitled Game Changers, which currently has 6 books in it, and there will be a 7th coming out this year in 2026 that I believe will focus on Shane and Ilya's relationship further. I should say I've not read the books. And as I said at the top, I typically talk about horror movies, and I generally don't watch romance. However, I do like to support queer content, so that is something that I will just like put on in the background and have on so it can get viewership numbers, doing the smallest little part I can. But yeah, romance is not typically something that I watch. So if I'm coming at this from a weird place, that's why typically when I watch a sex scene, I'm like, all right, so when Jason's gonna show up and kill these people now? So I'm a little biased in that regard, just so you know the lens that I'm talking about. Back to the show. The series is directed by Jacob Tierney for a Canadian streaming service called Crave, which I'd not heard of up until very recently. So, way to go, Crave. You just did a lot of free advertising for yourself. It was picked up for an American distribution by HBO Max. HBO Max. I don't know what it's called. Keeps changing. I can't keep up. And when I looked it up on IMDb, it was sitting at a 9 out of 10. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it was sitting at 97%. I don't know if those numbers have changed at all. But those seem like deserved. I tried to read a New York Times article about entitled "The Popularity of Heated Rivalry Has Surprised Even TV Executives." Again for the New York Times, but I'm not signing up for it. I'm not giving them my money. News should be free. That's just a complaint. So I did read it. However, I read it really fast and didn't get to a point where I could tell you who wrote it. So again, I don't know who wrote it, but it's titled "The Popularity of Heated Rivalry Has Surpassed Even TV Executives." And basically, it was just giving you a little bit of a breakdown as of late December on what the viewership numbers look like. And I would say it definitely got word of mouth. This is like definitely something that built viewership numbers over time, which isn't as common today as it had been maybe for TV shows of the past. I'm not as knowledgeable about viewership numbers pertaining to television as I am with film. But I'm sure there have definitely been like word of mouth shows in the past. This is definitely just one example of that. I can't really think of any else top of my head. I think I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but it's definitely something that like obviously it's very popular. Like a lot of people heard about it, and I don't know how popular romance shows tend to be. Like, is this like one of the more popular ones? Because the only other one I could really think of is Bridgerton, which is pretty popular, and I think they just aired the 4th season. I don't know if they're dropping weekly. I know at least the first 2 episodes are out 100% for sure. I've not watched it, but I've watched the first 3 seasons in Queen Charlotte, but I've not watched this 4th season yet. But I think that was pretty popular from the get-go, and I'm sure it's built audience over the past, like, few years it's been dropping, but, um, yeah, this show just really kinda took the streaming service by storm. So way to go for them. So here's my quick recap. I don't know how quick it's gonna be. All my notes are about 13 pages, which for me, very light. And very scatterbrained. I try to make it make sense. I don't think I did, but I called this the unhinged bench because we're unhinged here, baby. So quick-ish recap that I'm not really confident about with the dates. Oh, so many dates. Okay, so Heated Rivalry starts in December of 2008. Of that I am sure. And I'm almost positive Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov, our two main characters, are teenagers at this point. I think they're supposed to be 17, or that's what the internet kept telling me, but I didn't find any contextual evidence in the show saying they were 17, but they're teenagers. That's just kind of how sports work, I guess. They're at the International Prospect Cup, which I guess is, I don't know how hockey works. My knowledge of hockey comes exclusively from Yuri on Ice and the Mighty Ducks. Do you know Air Bud doesn't have a hockey film? Air Bud should have had a hockey film. That's neither here nor there. So I guess this is where the International Prospect Cup, I'm assuming, is where we decide like who's going to get drafted into the Professional Hockey League, I assume. So that's all I got. Anyway, they're kind of Shane and Ilya, the main characters, are kind of flirty with one another and sending signals, particularly Ilya towards Shane. And he's given the kind of wink, wink, nudge. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? And Shane, it took him a little while to realize that that was what was being put down so that he could pick it up. But he got there. And from their first introduction to the first time they meet up post shower scene, I think it's like a year and a half. So at this point, they're like maybe 19-ish. They're in their late teens. And the show makes a lot of time jumps. It's hard to keep track. And whenever Shane and Ilya meet up over the years, they continue to be flirty and kind of hook up with one another. I would say more than anything, it's like a slow burn. A majority of the side story is devoted to another hockey player in the third episode, Scott Hunter, and his relationship with the smoothie maker and grad school prospect. Way to go there, with the best TV dad I've ever seen. Oh, talk about supported. Kip. Did you know Kip is short for Christopher? I for sure didn't know that. That's interesting. Anyway, it's not important, but I was like, Kip? I thought his name was Kip Christopher. And then they were the conversation at the bar. I'm like, oh, okay, no, Kip is Christopher. Anyway, also, so many people were saying he was a barista. Are smoothie makers called baristas? I feel like if you say you're a barista and you don't give me coffee, you give me a smoothie, we're going to have words. Extreme words. Like, that's violence. Not on my end, on theirs. That's cruelty. Anyway, so the entire third episode diverges from Shane and Ilya to Scott and Kip. And I think from my understanding, Scott and Kip are the first book in this series, Game Changers. That book is about them. And the second book is Shane and Ilya. And I think they're also what the fifth book is about. As viewers, we go from watching these two young hockey players having kind of a slow burn, tense, sexual, passionate relationship to two men who are a little bit older. I'm not sure how old they're supposed to be. Like, Kip is 26 for sure. And then Scott, I'm assuming in his late 30s. And they're having this kind of beautiful, slower romance with really fantastic open communication. I love that. Then we cut back to Shane and Ilya for episodes 4 through 6. Slowly, Shane and Ilya's relationship is growing and is more importantly deepening. Ilya in particular starts to express, albeit with hints, that he's invested in the relationship, but that kind of freaks Shane out at first. He just isn't ready for that, which is understandable. And it's this kind of push-pull situation. Like, Ilya uses Shane's first name. Shane starts a relationship with Rose. Ilya loses his father and wants more with Shane, and he comes to term that he's in love with Shane. Shane comes to term with his own sexuality and then his own feelings towards Ilya. Ilya sees Shane get hurt, and that kind of causes him to back off a little bit. It's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of situation. At the end of the 5th episode, after winning the cup, I guess it's like the big, I don't know, any sports stuff, anything. I guess it's like the big tournament cup. Scott Hunter calls Kip out onto the ice and kisses him publicly. And this is a sort of representation and open expression of love that Ilya and Shane needed to see. Ilya gets the courage to call Shane and tell him he's going or coming to the cottage. The show culminates in May, I think, summer of 2017, when Ilya stays at Shane's cottage and they are finally fully able to express that they love one another and plan their future together. And by this point, I think it's been about 8.5 years. Really hope I did my math right there. Well, it's certainly been from definitely December 2008 to summer of 2017. And I think that's 8.5 years. And now I said it and I don't feel confident. And they should be in about their mid-20s, like about 25. So it's been from like when they were 17 to about 25 or 26. And the show ends with Shane coming out to his parents and being accepted. Okay. So some things that I've heard on the social medias that I just wanted to comment on. Again, all opinions here. I'm definitely biased by just like who I am as a person. I'm sapphic. Additionally, I don't really like, as I said before, romance stories very much. Not to say I've never watched any, but just generally not my thing. So I'm coming at this from a little bit of a weird perspective that I'm totally uninterested in men. And that seems to be what most people are interested in watching, but not everybody. Also, yeah. Okay, anyway. So first, I'm only going to make this nitpick because it's kind of relevant. The show really isn't depicting an enemies to lovers trope, right? Like, they're rivals. They're in competition with one another, but they've always liked and respected one another. Enemies to lover, I assume, requires one or both parties to have disdain for one another, more like Bridgerton 2, or You've Got Mail. You know, with Heated Rivalry, the competition aspect is something I'll bring up later, but it's really important. But they weren't enemies; they were rivals, and that's not necessarily the same thing. It's a little bit nuanced, but it's different. Next, queers in isolation. Watching episode 3, I was a little disappointed in how Scott Hunter was depicted in total isolation. No one knows he's gay. He has no friends outside of his job, no family, nothing. In media, gay and trans people are often depicted alone. As it pertains to Scott Hunter's specific situation, we know from accounts a lot of gay actors back in the golden era of Hollywood had community. They might not have been out publicly, but they were out to their circle. I don't know about athletes as much. Did I mention I know nothing about sports? But I would assume it's kind of the same. And I think it's kind of unhealthy to continuously perpetuate this idea that when someone's in the closet, absolutely nobody knows. Well, there are a lot of queer people who are out to some people and not out to others. It's called the queer community for a reason. It's a community. I think it's important to show people in a community that even when they aren't out publicly or aren't out to everybody, they still have people in their inner circle who they're close to who do show love and support for them, because I think that is more commonly the experience. Given I am saying more commonly, that is not everyone. Okay. The show ends up escaping this for me, though, with Shane having come out to his parents. That's exactly what I'm talking about with celebrities. Like, they might not be out publicly, but privately they are. And that to me is so much better in terms of queer representation. I think it's so important to show people they're not alone. I just think it's healthier. Okay. People need to see queer people having allies and amongst each other, celebrating each other, even if the rest of the world as a whole isn't. So going back to Scott and Kip, I love them. I love them so, so much. In a single episode, plus the epilogue of another, they depicted one of the most beautiful relationships I've ever seen. I'm surprised I haven't heard people talking about the age difference between Scott and Kip as compared to Shane and Ilya. The first 2 episodes that are the more kind of sexually like hot and heavy ones are when Shane and Ilya are in their late teens and early 20s. The shift post episode 3, when their relationship slowly slows down a bit and like emotionally deepens, it's when they're in their mid-20s. I think that shift from, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube, we'll say it a promiscuous era to emotionally impactful era is common. Like, I'm sure you've all met people, like men in their teens and early 20s. Even if you look at that same guy, 10 years later, I'm sure he's a little bit less, you know, pervy. Well, it's not pervy. I don't know. He's just calmed down a bit in terms of sex, like most people do, because you're not 21 anymore. You know what I mean? Scott and Kip are older. I think Kip's 26. Um, Again, I think Scott's like in his mid 30s, maybe a little bit older. They're definitely more emotionally mature. Scott for sure. The relationship between those two men who are, a bit older compared to the two men who are about college aged is different. How you love, how you express love, your emotional maturity, what you expect in a relationship, and how you navigate in a relationship should change and evolve as you grow older, even with the same person. If you look at a couple who were together when they were in college, and if they stayed together 20 years later and ask them, I'm sure they tell you their relationship is a bit different. It looks a bit different. It should. They're older. They've grown and changed as people do. You shouldn't be stuck. Let's not do Peter Pan syndrome, right? Anywho, as someone in my own mid 30s, I just enjoyed watching Scott and Kip a lot more than Shane and Ilya, because I was so much more engaged in their relationship, and I love the communication. I am very much like Scott. I'm very forward, very blunt. Here's where I'm at. You can join me here, or we can not waste each other's time. I think that's the most fair way to be in a relationship. And I thought it was really beautiful seeing it depicted on screen. It's really very, very romantic, I think, and it's so beautiful. I also wanted to note the difference in the support systems that we see with the main characters. So Kip, again, best TV dad I've ever seen. He's so loved and very, very well adjusted. Scott lost his parents when he was 12 and views his team as family. Although I was so disappointed in episode 5 when they won the cup, and that none of his team members pulled him in with their families. Like, I feel like Hayden would, if Shane didn't have his parents, like Hayden would pull him in and, have him celebrating with his family if he didn't have anyone else. You know what I mean? Like, I was just disappointed that this man considers this team his family, but none of them are treating him like family in that moment. They let him be alone in that moment. That just seems so sad to me. But I guess it was necessary for him to pull Kip down on the ice. Anyway, so Shane does have both of his parents. And what I would consider like the most basic, like default idea of what a family looks like, mom, dad, etc. He does have a lot of pressure on him. But it's nothing like his mom is his manager, but she's not a momager. You know what I'm saying? Then Ilya, yikes. He lost his mom when he was 12 in a very traumatic way. Not to say like the death of a parent when you're young, I mean, that's always traumatic, but this was like extremely so. His dad seemed very harsh, and he is having a slow decline due to dementia, and his brother just simply sucks. Alexei, boo. Yeah. The person he's closest to seems to be Svetlana, but I will say I love that he does seem very, very close to his team, and I love the way that he is depicted with his team. I thought that was very nice. But the differences definitely impact who the characters are and how they express love, which I thought was really, really great to see kind of a full picture of who these characters are. And I have one more comparison to make. There's a huge difference between the Scott Kip romance compared to the Shane Ilya romance in terms of the profession. Kip isn't a hockey player. Shane and Ilya both are, and that makes a huge difference. Even I was thinking about lawyers. Like, if two lawyers are married, they probably wouldn't be representing opposing parties. Not to say that never happens, but it's unlikely to happen because that wouldn't be professional. That's not a professional situation. There's a conflict there. And there's a conflict here. I don't know if it's addressed in the books or not, but I do think it does make a huge difference. I've known people who dated coworkers and they kept it kind of on the down low because that does create an issue, particularly with the competition level here, as I was talking about earlier. That matters. Even Shane's mother brought up if he'd ever lost on purpose, like that it's kind of a big deal. Like even if they came out, there would still be a reason to keep their specific relationship on the down low. Because that is a little bit of an issue that I do think is relevant. And I do want to throw out I'm going to talk about later sapphic representation in comparison to gay men being represented in media. And I want to emphasize in media. I've seen people commenting about these two real life athletes who were in the Women's Professional Hockey League who came out and I think are together. I don't know if they're married or not. But I just want to say, personally, I'm not comfortable looking into real people's lives. Like, if other people are, that's fine. And that's not a judgment on my part. That's just, I'm not comfortable doing that. That's not something I would do. And I don't think real life people coming out and existing is a substitute for queer representation. Like, it's coming out and like doing an interview, I think is fine. Like, I would watch that. That's nice for people who are fans of that sport to see queer people in that space, or just in general. And if they wrote a book, like a biography, I would happily read it. If they had like a show based on their experiences or something like that, I think that's really great. But I don't think that real life people existing is a substitute for representation in media. They're not quite the same. Then I'll move on. Okay, so at this point, I want to retroactively explain why I watched Heated Rivalry because again, sapphic. I actually don't really like seeing sex on screen. Not to say it shouldn't be there, but that's just like I don't like watching that personally. I don't know why. I just like I can never remove myself from the knowledge that I'm watching actors perform a scene. So I'm just thinking like this is weird to have filmed probably. Yeah. Again, I don't like romance. Like I said, I put queer stuff on, and that's really why I put it on. And then it kind of blew up. But I got engaged because it was a good show. Like typically romance shows and films depict heteronormative couples and this kind of icky power dynamic, portraying toxic traits that actively make me root against them getting together. Like, no girl, run from him and his red flags. What I really appreciated about Heated Rivalry is they do what I call the Rodenberry maneuver. So Gene Rodenberry was the creator of Star Trek TOS, like the original series, and I love the original series. And something interesting that he did that I love is he decided that the tension, read drama, should arise from outside sources, so not from infighting within the crew of the Enterprises. And Heated Rivalry really, for the most part, does the same thing. The issues of two couples that we see don't really come from within, like they're not interpersonal, interrelationship, sorry. They arise from outside circumstances, particularly with Scott and Kit. Like I think they could have a perfect relationship if it wasn't for homophobia in sports, right? Like Shane and Ilya, they have a little bit more of like to deal with like being young. I guess that's kind of interpersonal, but like that's just like growth, you know? It's not an issue of the relationship between them. Neither of them are doing something toxic or inappropriate with one another or to one another. So because of this, I can actually root for them to get together, which is rare. And more of that, please. Okay. Although I will say, Shane not ever taking one damn moment to Google how Russia treats queer men seems like it could have resolved a lot of problems. That's neither here nor there. Although then again, Ilya could have explained. Whatever, we'll move on. Anyway, that brings me back to the competition and by extent power dynamics. About this side tangent like it's episode. And here I just get loosey-goosey and just kind of ranting and raving. So, buckle up if you're interested. The conversation around this show often comes down to, I've heard a lot of like, why do straight women watch Heated Rivalry? Or the gay hockey show that women like. And criticizing women for watching or a show for being watched by straight women. Even when it's about gay men. So there's a lot to unpack here. Regardless of who you are, regardless of who the show is about, in this case, gay men, shows want to be watched by everyone because viewership matters, numbers matter. Sadly, if a show is about a more niche demographic, it tends to mean less viewers. So, Heated Rivalry is, simply put, a well written, phenomenally acted show with great soundtrack, great lighting, great cinematography, phenomenal editing and pacing. You name it. Heated Rivalry excelled at it. Anyone can watch this show. I mean, I guess it might be like, I don't know, not appropriate for children, but like anyone of the right age can watch this show and appreciate it, if not outright enjoy it. And many love it. So, why specifically straight women? Okay. So, here, I'm on an outside perspective. Okay. So, here's my 2 cents. On a side note, I did look into this. So, the etymology of the here's my 2 cents, it's pretty old, but I traced it back to probably around the turn of the 20th century. So with inflation, it should be around 31 cents. So here's my 31 cents. Women find men attractive. Yeah, like that's it. From my experience of fandom, with straight women watching a TV show with attractive in it can get like 15 seasons. Okay, that maybe it's a little dramatic, but yeah, women will really like a show that has hot guys in it, and they'll stick around and watch it, and they'll be very, very, very loyal to it, even when that show isn't necessarily loyal to them. See Sherlock and Supernatural, and we can be forever. A lot of women like sex. I know, crazy. And some people are surprised by that. And women are actually allowed to like sex, and they're allowed to be attracted to people and enjoy sex. Like I've never heard a man be criticized for being turned on by sapphic content. Read adult films. Um, Men aren't really asked to defend that, and they aren't judged or laughed at for it. Men fetishizing or sexualizing women in any circumstance is considered normal, and like boys will be boys kind of thing. But when it happens the other way, people clearly find that jarring. But newsflash, I'm pretty sure the world's population would be a lot lower if women didn't like sex. Girls are taught to romance. Romance content is clearly marketed towards women. Girls see in the media that their happily ever after is winding up in a relationship. For reference, see Barbie as a rejection of that narrative. There is a long history of oppression that feeds into that. And women had so many restrictions on them. Their only options and societally viewed purpose and value was to get married and have babies. Watching content about gay men avoids the narrative and oppression that they'll see with someone who looks like themselves on screen. So it frees them up and allows them to just see two people who they're potentially attracted to in a romance, and that might just feel and look better and seem more freeing, and it allows them to enjoy it more. In fact, content about two men in a relationship rather than a man and a woman avoids a lot of the pitfalls of heteronormative romances tend to fall into. As I noted, I'm usually rooting against these romances. I often find myself saying and asking stuff like, what's with the age gap? Oh, he makes so much more than her. Am I supposed to like him because he's a red flag? This is manipulative. This is toxic. He's psychotic. No woman acts like this. And the sexualization of women. And oh my God, we'll be here all day as I talk about Hallmark movies. We'll move on. Stories. Well, actually, I'll circle back to this round. Okay. Side tangent again. Stories, books, TVs, movies historically have been written and made by men about men from males' perspectives. So women are subservient, word choice intended, to men's stories. In general, outside romance, women usually fulfill, or outside the romance genre rather, women usually fulfill the role of eye candy. For reference, see movies, visual pleasure, and narrative cinema. And if not that, then they are background characters who are cheerleaders and emotional support for men in men's stories, which Heated Rivalry does engage in that. Women, the female characters there, Rose, Svetlana, and Kip's two friends, whose names I don't remember, are there to root for the men. And I guess at least they are depicted positively. they feel like real women, which is head and shoulders above way too many shows and movies for 2026. And I think it's sad that in 2026, this is one of the best shows in terms of representation for not only gay men, but also for female representation. And they're just reduced to allies. In 2026, after millennia, multiple millennia of human existence, this is as far as we've gotten. That's not a knock on the show. That's a critique of society. Yikes. Just looking at how people are discussing women enjoying this show reminds me society really still devalues things women like, things perceived as feminine, like romance. I realize they aren't just devalued, they're fully laughed at. And they're also infantilized. I think that's why people get so thrown that women would like a show with sex in it and will so openly talk about sex. It's kind of part of purity culture, maybe. I don't know. It's weird. So let's circle back around and talk about fetish. Are straight women fetishizing gay men and gay romance? The short answer is yes, some totally are. And then also, no, a whole lot aren't. So there's a subtle but important difference between fetishizing and sexualizing. So fetishizing is sexualizing with a component of not just objectification, but dehumanization. I would describe men watching sapphic adult films as fetishizing, whereas women reading a romance book with sex scenes is sexualizing them from the facet of romancing or romanticizing that. They still consider them characters with agency, right? And not to get too into the socio-historical context again, but there is a marked difference between men sexualizing women and women sexualizing men. Men have not faced the oppression or violence against them that women has as a whole. I personally don't like sexualizing and fetishizing happening either way. I think it's cringy as hell, but that's fully my opinion. A lot of people seem to be really fine with it. Like I just don't get it. Like I just don't get it. Like going on social media and tagging something in someone like an actor in about a really explicitly sexual tweet, to me, baffling behavior. Don't get it. Don't like it. But it's not. I mean, unless the person specifically says they're bothered by it, like whatever. I just don't like it. But that's that's your business. I'm minding mine. We move on. Why do women write these books? There's a whole thing, like you could go on Book Talk about like women writing these BL stories, like male love stories. Okay, I guess I've already mentioned the reasons why, so let's just kind of tie them in together. I'll repeat myself verbatim. Stories, books, TV, movies historically have been written and made by men about men from men's perspectives. Women are only in these past few years getting published at equal rates, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're being read at equal rates. More importantly, I think what you read while you're young in your formative years influences how you write. Most school books that you're like required to read are written by men. Further, it's not uncommon for books written by women for like children's books to have a main male character, like Harry Potter as an example, although yeah, we'll move on. We're taught to read from the male perspective, and that's not even getting into like movies and TV and stuff, which is overwhelmingly male. I would hazard a guess that it's easy to write from a male perspective because you've been taught your whole life to read from it. Like it's almost everything reading is from a male perspective. It's just easy to write from that same perspective. And that's not even getting into the commercialization aspect of it. Males are privileged in almost every aspect of life. And that certainly goes for audiences. I've heard so often in terms of movies and TV that showrunners and directors are asked by studios to put in things for the boys and men to enjoy while watching. Like, what are the boys going to like in this movie? You know what I mean? But I've never heard it go the other way around. Women are always, like in terms of audiences, asked to put themselves in the male perspective, to empathize and sympathize with men and their stories and their issues. Men are never asked to do that for women and girls. And to that I say boo. Anyway, men and boys are rarely really ever asked to do that for girl stories. So, what's worse is if a man does empathize with a girl's like story or does get into like a girl show, they're typically criticized for it. Yikes. And basically it comes down to if you're writing a book and you want your book to do well, it's in your best interest to make the main characters male. And I think there's also an aspect of sexual repression here, maybe. I'm not super sure. And this gets a bit deeper than I want to go, but like, adults like sex, and that's fine actually. Common, normal, perfectly okay. Um, yeah. And hearing the way some people are talking about this show just highlighted how repressed people in the US and Canada are. Like, are we okay? Seeing a show with two young men that are having just like normal sex is getting people so hot and bothered. Like, this is considered smut. I even had to look up the word smut because I'm like, maybe I don't know what it means. Like, people consider this spicy. Like, it's just two 20-something-year-olds having sex and maybe a way that I would consider vanilla. Like, it's maybe strawberry with sprinkles. Like, it's so basic. Like, maybe I don't know, maybe my college promiscuous era was, like, a lot more, promiscuous than I realized. I don't know, it just seems sad to me. Like, guys, get a grip. Anyway, um, okay, so now I wanna talk about, like, other queer content. I can only talk about what I've seen. I know Looking just came out on HBO Max. I haven't seen that yet. So I don't know how it would pertain. But something that really bothered me about hearing the way people talk about Heated Rivalry is they tended to like erase other shows that exist in order to build Heated Rivalry up. And I just don't think that's necessary. And in fact, I think it's a little bit unhelpful. Like other shows can exist too, and the more that do and that are good should exist, and we should want, and we shouldn't like put them down in order to build Heated Revelry up, right? You know, but I will say I did appreciate that Heated Revelry is a queer show that's happy, you know, and that's good. So Fellow Travelers is a show that I would say is just a tragic gay, but it's just as sexy. Like at one point, Jonathan Bailey basically deep throat Matt Bomer's foot. Like the show is very sexually explicit. I would say more so than Heated Rivalry, but it's very sad. It takes place in the 50s to the 80s, also a lot of time jumps. But it starts with a lavender scare and ends with one of the characters dying from AIDS. But it's very historically relevant and accurate. It was written by a gay. It's based on a book written by a gay man. I think the other ones I'm going to talk about are all, or most of the next three are based on books written by women. Interview with the Vampire, Heartstopper, and Love Victor, I think was written by a woman. I should have looked that up. Interview with the Vampire, very sexy, very dramatic. Heartstopper is very sweet, very endearing coming out story with two younger boys, but also has a lot of other representation going on in it, which I think is really great. Love Victor, very teen angsty coming out, you know. Our Flag Means Death is camp as hell and very romantic and sweet. It also has a lot of other representation involved in it as well, that I love to see. Also phenomenal female representation, like really great. So I do think that there's too much content about like tragic gay men, and having like more sweeter romances is refreshing. I don't know if this is cruel to say, but for a long time, queer romance was coming from they have to be in the closet and they can never have a fulfilling love life and be with the person who they love, like Brokeback Mountain, or it's AIDS. Like, I can't remember the story. It's not the Philadelphia story, is it? No, it's not the Philadelphia. I can't remember what it's called. With Tom Hanks as a lawyer with AIDS, but like there's so many stories like that. But for a long time, I think that just was the narrative, and a very harmful one at that. But I think with younger people, like I'm just looking at the actors' ages, they're in their early 20s. The actors who play Ilya and Shane, and yeah, they didn't those like not to get in their real lives, but just talking about like age wise for like that demographic. would they be Gen Z? They didn't live through the AIDS. Like, I'm a millennial. Like, people, gay men my age, did not live through the AIDS crisis. We were educated on it, but like I think when you're learning about stuff at school, sometimes it feels like it happened so long ago. Like, it feels like history. And we're getting further and further removed from the 80s and from that tragic narrative. But it was real. It did happen and it should not be forgotten. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's just when media decided to portray only two stories and they were both sad as hell, I think I understand the swing to go and make things overly happy. And I think that's fair. I think eventually there'll be a middle swing to something a little bit more realistic. But yeah, that seems fair. Yeah, okay. So going back to explicit stuff for a moment. Um, so sex being depicted in the show gets a little complex. Live action, talking live action. Same-sex female relationships tend to be overly sexual. Not always, not always. Shout out to Will and Tara, but oftentimes, they're like two women being together is there for the male gaze explicitly. That's it. Meanwhile, gay men in media can be treated so differently. A lot of time we see like a single gay man, or like in Modern Family where there are couples, but they don't even really kiss, so they kind of remove sex from the conversation entirely. So I mentioned it above, but there's a different social historical context here. So it's a little different. I'm very much for de-emphasizing the sexualization of women, especially sapphic relationships. But that being said, I don't think it should be removed completely because, again, if we're depicting adult women, it's okay to depict an adult relationship, which typically includes sex. That's just healthy. Like, we don't need to erase it. But that goes for male gay relationships as well. Like, historically, sex has been overemphasized in regards to conversations about the queer community. Consider the I cannot pronounce that word, pathologized term homosexual, and anti-queer arguments that typically frame queer people as being sexually perverse. It's important to show queer people as human beings, and it's understandable to be hesitant about how to show physical intimacy in same-sex relationships because it is a little bit, like I said, complex. The right answer isn't to erase it, but it's also not to fetishize it. There's a healthy between somewhere, and I think Heated Rivalry did a good job of being kind of middle ground. I really can't get over how sexually repressed North Americans are. It's wild. I'm so sorry for us. Okay, so moving on. I heard people asking, like, where is the lesbian Heated Rivalry? And like, I like sapphic representation in film and media. But I will say, if someone says where is the lesbian Heated Rivalry, we're talking about TV. If you give someone who wants representation in television and you give them a book rec, that's diabolical. And I'm a reader. I love to read. I usually read nonfiction though because I'm boring. But I do read about 20 books a year, which is, I think, a lot more than most, but a lot less than like a book talk girly. But I'm reading nonfiction, so the homework that is required to get through some of those is maybe a little bit more than reading a fictional story. So that's a little bit more time consuming often. Not to say one is better than the other. Absolutely would never meet that argument. If you're reading, and that is fantastic. If you're writing fan fiction, also fantastic. Go off. Love you for it. But don't give someone a book recommendation unless they ask when they want the lesbian Heated Rivalry. That's not what they're asking for, and you know it. But the closest I can think of in terms of TV would be A League of Their Own, which only got one season. It's set in the 1940s and is about, like the movie, it's about a female baseball team. And there's a lot. I do think that A League of Their Own, the movie, is the most straight-washed movie ever made. Even real life, Rosie O'Donnell played a straight woman. Like, are we kidding with this? Come on. A lot of lesbian shows only get one season, and also a lot of them are animated. Meh. men are more represented in live action, and I think that plays into the infantilization of women and femininity. But gay men are more often rather, shown as single, whereas women are more often shown as being like in a relationship with one another. I don't know why that is. That is something I observed. I made a list and I got like 70 shows that I can think of that either where they had any queer, like it had to be at least a cast member, like a reoccurring, not like just a background. Hey, that one person might be gay or something. I got 70, and there were definitely a lot more male representation than female representation in that. But women were shown a lot more in animated stuff, and were less likely to be the center of the show. Like I could think of shows where it's like, yes, this show is about this, like the star of the show is a queer person, like Agatha All Along, I would count. But there were more where it's like this is centering on gay men, like Heated Rivalry, Fellow Travelers, and so on. It almost doubled it. So, but that's I can only speak for the shows that I've seen. But 70 is not a small number with queer representation. So anyway, yeah. I can't think of a single show devoid of an avid female audience that is successful. Like once you get an avid female audience, you tend to get more than one season. And a show centering on two women in love will not get that attention or devotion of a straight female audience. That show's focusing on gay men. Well, sadly, men, gay, straight, or otherwise, often don't show up for lesbians either, which kind of sucks. Yeah. Be more open-minded, less judgmental. Damn. I don't want to be mean, but straight women who only show up for gay men are not allies in my mind. If you don't show up for lesbians or trans people, you're not an ally. At that point, I'd say I would distinguish what that person is doing in their viewership of Heated Rivalry as fetishization rather than sexualizing them from a point of view of romanticizing them, because they're just viewing that character as an object to get off on, which is disappointing. And I do think it's a little bit internalized misogyny. Like, why would you, if you want a romance story, two women being in love could be significantly more romantic, or at bare minimum just as romantic. But women tend to like romance, so like two women being together tends to be really fucking romantic. Oh man. And talk about a healthy, and not to say that all sapphics are like really healthy, but they tend to be a bit nicer than men. Although gay men tend to be a hell of a lot nicer than straight men, but not always. Again, we're all people. We can be just as toxic as the straights. And I don't know. It's just, yeah. Heated Rivalry to me shows that a well-made show will do well and gain word of mouth and high viewership. And well, that's what I want it to mean. That's what I would like that to mean. It does make me sad that in 2026, this is as far as we've gotten in terms of queer web. And sadly, it's highlighting to me by the narrative surrounding it how misogynist our culture still is, which is a bummer. It's a great show. And I hope it shows other studios that an audience is there for this and that makes step towards progress. I hope that's the lesson learned. I'm excited it's getting a second season. Absolutely will be watching that. I should go watch Looking later today, maybe. Anyway, that concludes this Horror Nerds rant about queer romance show. I hope that was at least fun to listen to my rants on the longest January on record. It's midnight, February 1st, thank goodness, right now. All right, if you'll excuse me, I have some oozing to do. Stay with the rainbows.